In a city of glittering lights and endless lies, one man was worshipped like a god, Mr. Richard Hale, the billionaire who claimed to save the poor. But behind his perfect smile and marble mansion, he hid a secret so dark it could destroy everything he built. And when a poor housemaid named Anna Brooks stepped through his iron gates, two worlds collided, one of power and one of pain. She came to clean his house, but she would end up exposing his soul. This is not a love story. This is a story about power, lies, and the price of silence. The city woke early each morning to the hum of traffic and the gleam of glass towers catching the sun. Down on the main avenue, a black car glided through the crowd like a shark through smaller fish. People turned their heads, some raising their phones for a photo, others whispering his name. That's Mr. Richard Hale. To most of them, he was a symbol of success, wealthy, charming, generous beyond imagination. News anchors called him the man who gave back. His face smiled from magazine covers beside headlines that praised his charity foundations and business empire. He owned construction firms, hotels, tech startups, even a chain of private schools. Each time a ribbon was cut, cameras flashed and Richard spoke with that calm, controlled voice people trusted. "I believe in helping those who cannot help themselves," he'd say, and the audience would applaud. His suit always fit perfectly. His watch gleamed like a tiny sun on his wrist, and the world believed every word. But behind the high iron gates of the Hale estate, the truth lived in silence. The mansion sat on a hill above the city, its white walls glowing in the daylight, its gardens trimmed so precisely they looked painted. Security guards patrolled every corner. Inside, the marble floors reflected everything but emotion. Even the air smelled expensive. Cologne, polish, fresh lilies, and tall vases. No one raised their voice here unless it was Mr. Hale himself. Early one Monday morning, Richard sat in his home office, the size of a small apartment. Shelves of leather-bound books rose behind him. He was reading financial reports when his phone buzzed. "Good morning, Mr. Hale," said a polite female voice. "This is Mrs. Johnson from the agency. We found someone for the housemaid position." He leaned back in his leather chair, lips curving slightly. "Good. What's her name?" "Anna Brooks. She's 22, hard-working, quiet, and comes from a small town up north. Excellent references, sir." "Does she live alone?" "Yes, sir. No family in the city." That made him smile. "Perfect. Send her tomorrow morning at 8. When the call ended, he rose and walked to the tall window. Outside, gardeners trimmed hedges shaped like swans. His world looked flawless, obedient. He whispered to his reflection in the glass, "Everything I want, I get." He believed it. What he didn't know was that the new maid coming tomorrow carried a truth strong enough to crack the glass around his life. Across the city, Anna Brooks folded the last of her worn clothes into a canvas bag. Her apartment was barely big enough for one person. A single bulb, cracked walls, a window that rattled when buses passed. On the small wooden table sat a photo in a broken frame. Two children, smiling wide, a boy of 10, a girl of 8. Her brother Leo and sister Grace. Anna ran her fingers over their faces. "I'll take care of you," she whispered. "I promise." The promise had been keeping her alive since the accident that took their parents the year before. While an aunt watched the children in their hometown, Anna worked any job she could find. Laundry, cleaning, cooking, sending almost every dollar home for school fees and food. The job at the Hale mansion paid more than anything she'd had before. It could mean real safety for her siblings. Still, fear pressed on her chest. Not just fear of failing, but the secret she carried in her blood. 6 months earlier, when headaches and fevers wouldn't stop, she'd gone to a free clinic. The doctor, a gentle, middle-aged man, had asked her to sit before he spoke. She remembered the sterile smell of disinfectant and the hum of the fluorescent light above them. "Anna," he had said softly, "your test came back positive." At first, she didn't understand. Positive for what? He looked at her with those careful eyes doctors use when truth becomes a wound. For HIV. Her world had frozen. The words didn't fit in her ears. "That can't be," she'd whispered. "I've only been with one person, my boyfriend." "I'm afraid that's often how it happens," he'd said. "You'll need medication every day. It's manageable if you stay consistent." When she confronted her boyfriend, he denied everything, cursed her, and disappeared. For weeks she cried each night, feeling ruined, dirty, unworthy of touch or love. But whenever despair pulled her down, she saw Leo and Grace's faces in her mind. They still needed her. So she learned to swallow pills with cold water each morning and move forward. No one else knew. Not her aunt, not her friends. The secret lived inside her quietly like a sleeping fire. Now, as dawn touched the city, Anna packed her few belongings and whispered another prayer. "God, help me stay strong. Help me do this right." At 7 the next morning, she left the apartment wearing her best dress, a simple blue one, faded but clean. 2 buses later, she stepped into the kind of neighborhood she'd only seen on television. Wide streets, manicured lawns, driveways guarded by cameras. When she reached the Hale gate exactly at 8, her breath caught. The mansion stretched before her like a palace. The iron bars were taller than any fence she'd ever seen. Even the mailbox looked expensive. A uniformed guard approached. "What's your business here?" "Good morning, sir," she said politely. "My name is Anna Brooks. Mr. Hale is expecting me. I'm the new maid." He eyed her worn shoes, hesitated, then called the house through his earpiece. "She's here," he said, listening to the reply. Finally, he pressed a button, and the gate opened with a slow mechanical sigh. "Go straight to the front door. Someone will meet you." "Thank you." Anna walked up the long driveway. Flowers spilled from the garden beds in impossible colors. Violet, scarlet, gold. A fountain in the center sent arcs of water glittering in the sunlight. The air smelled of roses and wealth. For a moment, she felt as if she'd entered another world, a world that didn't have room for people like her. Beauty, yet no warmth. Before she could knock, the heavy door opened. A woman in a black and white uniform stood there, about 50, her expression calm but drained. "You must be Anna," the woman said. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Mrs. Collins, the housekeeper. Been here 15 years. You'll report to me." Her tone wasn't unkind, just stripped of hope. "Come in." Anna stepped into a hallway wide enough to be a ballroom. The floor shone like a mirror. Paintings hung in gold frames. A grand staircase curved upward like a question mark leading to another life. "Don't touch anything unless you're cleaning it," Mrs. Collins warned. "And when you clean, be careful. Break something here and it could cost you a year's wages." "Yes, ma'am." They walked through the mansion. Kitchen, dining hall, sitting rooms with cream-colored furniture that no one seemed to use. At last, Mrs. Collins stopped at a tall wooden door and knocked twice. A deep voice answered, "Come in." She opened the door. "Mr. Hale, the new maid is here." "Excellent. Send her in." Anna stepped inside, heart pounding. The office smelled of polished wood and expensive whiskey. Behind a desk, large enough to command respect, sat Mr. Richard Hale himself. He was taller than she expected, early 40s, fit, his dark hair perfectly cut. His white shirt looked freshly pressed by someone else's hands. He smiled, revealing flawless teeth, but his eyes were a colder color than steel. "Anna Brooks," he said, rising and circling the desk. "Welcome to my home." "Thank you, sir. I'm grateful for this opportunity. Look at me when you speak." She lifted her eyes quickly. "That's better," he said, studying her face. "How old are you?" 22, sir." "Married?" "No, sir." "Boyfriend?" The question made her stomach tighten. "No, sir." "Good." He smiled again, the smile people use when they know you have no escape. "I don't like drama in my household. Your duties are simple. Clean, cook, wash, and whatever else is required. Mrs. Collins will train you. You'll work from 5 in the morning until 9 at night, 6 days a week. Sundays are free. Pay is $200 a month. Payment at month's end if your work is good. Understood?" "Yes, sir." He stepped closer until she could smell his cologne. Sharp, heavy. "You're a pretty girl, Anna," he said softly. "Very pretty indeed." Her heart raced. She wanted to step back, but her feet wouldn't move. "I think we'll get along just fine as long as you're obedient." "Yes, sir," she whispered. "Good. Mrs. Collins will show you to your quarters." When Anna left the room, her legs felt weak. In the hall, Mrs. Collins looked at her face and seemed to understand. She only said, "Follow me." They walked through service corridors until they reached a small building behind the mansion. Peeling paint, rusted hinges. Inside was a narrow bed, one chair, a table, and a barred window. "Servants' quarters," Mrs. Collins said. "It's not much, but better than the street." Anna forced a smile. "It's fine, ma'am. Thank you." As she set her bag down, she asked quietly, "Is Mr. Hale a good man to work for?" Mrs. Collins hesitated. The silence stretched until it felt heavy. Then she said, "Just do your job, keep your head down, and don't ask questions. That's how you survive in this house." Then she left. Anna sat on the bed. It creaked under her weight. The walls were gray, water-stained, the air faintly damp. She pulled out the photo of her siblings and set it on the table. Survive, she thought. Not live, not work. Survive. She lay back and stared at the ceiling, hearing echoes of Mrs. Collins' warning and Mr. Hale's smooth voice overlapping in her mind. She whispered to herself, "I'll be strong for them." Outside, the sun slipped lower, painting gold on the mansion's windows. Somewhere inside, Richard Hale poured another glass of whiskey and watched the reflection of his empire in the liquid. He saw perfection. Anna saw a cage. The next morning, before dawn, the mansion was already awake. The hum of vacuum cleaners, the clink of dishes, the distant sound of sprinklers outside. Anna rose at 5, her body still sore from the long bus ride the day before. She washed quickly, tied her hair back, and reported to the kitchen. Mrs. Collins handed her a stack of towels. First task, wipe down the marble staircase, then polish the railings. Mr. Hale notices everything. "Yes, ma'am." Hours passed in a rhythm of silence and orders. Dusting, scrubbing, folding. By midday, her hands stung from cleaning fluid. When she prepared breakfast for Mr. Hale, scrambled eggs with cheese, toast, buttered on one side only, orange juice without pulp, she repeated every step exactly as Mrs. Collins had shown her. "He likes precision," the older woman murmured. "Don't give him a reason to speak." But he spoke anyway. Every morning, his footsteps echoed through the hall like a metronome. "Good morning, Anna," he'd say with a smile that never touched his eyes. "You slept well?" She'd nod. "Good. Keep it that way. I value obedience." He said it as if obedience were a gift he gave her. That night, when she finally collapsed on her bed, she stared at the barred window again. The moonlight drew thin lines across her face. Somewhere beyond those bars were 2 children waiting for her letters. She whispered a prayer neither of them would ever hear. Days turned into a week. Anna learned the unspoken rules of the house. Never enter the master's study without permission. Never speak to Mrs. Hale unless spoken to. Never make eye contact with Mr. Hale longer than necessary. She followed them all. Still, his presence pressed on her like a shadow that never left. One afternoon, while she and Mrs. Collins washed dishes, the older woman broke the silence. "You're a hard worker," she said quietly. "Thank you, ma'am, but hard work won't always save you here." Mrs. Collins's voice dropped. "Be careful, Anna. Very careful." Anna frowned. "Careful of what?" Mrs. Collins looked toward the door before whispering. "Of him. Mr. Hale isn't the man people think he is." Before Anna could ask more, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Mrs. Collins straightened instantly, her face blank again. Richard Hale entered, dressed in a gray suit, ready for work. "Good morning, ladies." "Good morning, sir," they answered in unison, but his gaze landed only on Anna. "Anna, come to my office before I leave. I have instructions for you." "Yes, sir." Her throat felt dry. As she followed him down the corridor, the sound of her own heartbeat drowned out her footsteps. Inside the office, he closed the door gently behind them. The click of the lock was soft but final. "Sit," he said, pointing to the chair before his desk. She obeyed. He didn't sit opposite her. Instead, he perched on the edge of his desk, close enough that she could see the faint lines at the corners of his mouth. "You've been here almost a week," he said. "How do you like it?" "It's good, sir. Thank you for giving me the job. The others treat you well?" "Yes, sir." He nodded slowly. "I'm a generous man, Anna. When people work hard for me, I reward them." "I'll continue to work hard, sir. I'm sure you will." He rested a hand on her shoulder. "You're a beautiful girl. Has anyone ever told you that?" She froze. "Thank you, sir," she murmured, eyes fixed on the floor. "Look at me." She forced herself to meet his gaze. "You have lovely eyes." His hand slid from her shoulder to her cheek. "Do you know why I hired you? Because I'm a hard worker?" He laughed softly. "That too. But I saw something special in you." Her stomach twisted. The air felt heavy. Just then, a knock shattered the moment. "Mr. Hale?" Mrs. Collins' voice came through the door. "Your driver's here for the 9 o'clock meeting." Richard's jaw tightened. "I'll be right there." He stood, grabbed his briefcase, and looked back at Anna. "We'll finish this conversation later." When he left, Anna's legs nearly gave out. In the hallway, Mrs. Collins waited, worry etched on her face. "Are you all right?" Anna nodded weakly. "Come to the kitchen," Mrs. Collins said. "You need tea." Over steaming cups, the older woman spoke in a whisper. "He touched you, didn't he?" Anna's silence was answer enough. Mrs. Collins sighed, the sound of someone who'd seen too much. "You're not the first. There were others. Girls like you, young, poor, desperate. He starts with compliments, then favors, then—" She stopped, her hands trembling slightly. "If you resist, he fires you. If you talk, he ruins you. Some girls just disappear." Anna felt the blood drain from her face. "Disappear?" Mrs. Collins nodded. "He has friends in every office that matters. Judges, police, business leaders. No one crosses him." Anna stared into her tea, the reflection of the ceiling light trembling on the surface. "What should I do?" "Keep your head down," Mrs. Collins said. "Avoid being alone with him. Survive." "Survive," Anna repeated. The word tasted like ashes. That night, in her small room, she lay awake listening to the distant hum of the city below the hill. Somewhere out there, people laughed, lived, loved freely. She turned to the photo of Leo and Grace on her table. "For you," she whispered. "I'll survive for you." But another voice, quiet and certain, whispered back inside her mind. "Run, Anna. Run before it's too late." She closed her eyes against it. She couldn't run. Not yet. Tomorrow she would wake up again at 5, clean the marble floors until they gleamed, and pretend not to feel the monster watching her from behind the perfect smile of Mr. Richard Hale. The night inside the Hale estate never felt silent. Even when the world outside went still, something always whispered through the house. The faint hum of cameras, the creak of settling marble, the rhythm of footsteps that did not belong to the servants. Anna often woke to those sounds, her heart racing though nothing visible moved. Fear had a weight, and she carried it like another layer of skin. Each morning began before the first hint of light. The alarm clock by her bed buzzed at 5. She would sit up, swallow the pill that kept her alive, and whisper, "Just one more day." The mirror on the wall showed a pale, tired girl with eyes too old for her years. She pinned her hair neatly, tied her apron, and stepped into the cold hallway. Mrs. Collins was always first in the kitchen. The older woman's back was slightly bent, her hair pulled into a tight gray bun. "Mornin'," she would mutter without turning. The smell of coffee and bleach filled the air. "Mornin', ma'am," Anna would reply, forcing a small smile. Together they moved in quiet coordination, cleaning counters, laying breakfast trays, arranging flowers in the dining room. The mansion demanded perfection. Dust or fingerprints were treated like personal insults to Mr. Hale. By 7, the house gleamed again, as if the night itself had never touched it. At 8, the sound of leather shoes on marble meant he was awake. Richard Hale always descended the staircase slowly, enjoying the way sound announced him. His voice followed next. "Good morning, everyone." The servants lined up silently. He inspected the room as if each of them were part of the decor. When his eyes reached Anna, they lingered half a second longer than proper. "Anna," he said one morning, "my coffee was cold yesterday." "I'm sorry, sir. I'll make sure it's hot today." "Good. I like my mornings predictable." Then came the smile. That same public smile she had seen on magazine covers, now sharpened into something private and dangerous. Weeks passed. The mansion's routine became mechanical. Anna's days blurred into the same sequence of motions: sweep, scrub, serve, repeat. Yet the air seemed to thicken around her whenever Mr. Hale was near. Sometimes, while she dusted the library shelves, she felt his eyes following her reflection in the glass. Other times, he found excuses to call her upstairs. "Anna," he said one afternoon, "come here a moment. The curtains in my office are uneven." When she arrived, the curtains were already perfect. He stood by the window, sunlight cutting across his sharp features. "Pull them just a little to the left." She obeyed, aware of the silence between them. His gaze moved over her in a way that made her want to shrink. "That's better," he murmured. "You have an eye for detail. I like that." "Thank you, sir. Have you settled in? No problems?" "No, sir." "Good. I take care of people who stay loyal." He turned, so close she could smell his cologne. Cedar and smoke. "Loyalty matters more than anything." She nodded, unable to speak. "Go on now," he said finally, but his eyes told her she hadn't really left. That night she lay in bed, trying to push away the feeling of his gaze. Her mind wandered to Leo and Grace. She imagined them finishing homework at the small kitchen table back home, their laughter echoing through the house that used to belong to her parents. Every dollar she earned went there. School supplies, food, medicine. That thought kept her breathing. Yet even the letters from her aunt began to sound worried. "Are you working too hard? You don't sound happy, my dear. Come home for a visit." Anna folded the letter carefully and placed it under her pillow. Home was too far away now. She couldn't lose the job, no matter how uneasy she felt. One evening, near the end of her second month, the mansion prepared for a charity dinner. Politicians, investors, and reporters would arrive to celebrate Mr. Hale's new foundation for women's empowerment. Anna and the staff worked from dawn till nightfall polishing silver, setting tables, arranging flowers. The irony stung like acid. By 7 o'clock, the guests arrived, men in tuxedos, women in diamonds. Laughter filled the hall like perfume. Richard Hale moved through the crowd like a practiced actor, his arm around Mrs. Catherine Hale, who wore a red gown and a frozen smile. "Darling," he whispered to her in public, "you look stunning tonight." Catherine smiled for the cameras, but when no one watched, her eyes went distant. She had played this role too long to forget the script. Anna served wine, trying to blend into the background. When she passed behind Richard, she heard him telling a senator, "Every woman deserves dignity and opportunity." The guests applauded. He caught Anna's glance and winked. Her hand shook so badly she almost spilled the wine. Later, when the party ended and everyone left, Mrs. Collins dismissed the other maids. "Go rest. I'll handle the kitchen." Anna stayed behind to collect glasses. The house felt different now, emptier yet heavier. She stacked plates in the dining room, unaware that footsteps were approaching. "Still working." She turned. Richard stood in the doorway, his tie loosened, a half-empty glass in hand. The smell of whiskey hung around him. "Yes, sir, just cleaning up. You work too hard," he said, stepping closer. "Sit down for a minute." "I'm fine, sir." "That wasn't a suggestion." His tone changed, soft but edged. "Sit." She obeyed. He sat beside her, too close, the heat of his body making her skin crawl. "You've been here 2 months now," he said, running a finger along the rim of his glass. "You're quiet, loyal, careful. I like that." "Thank you, sir. You know, I could double your salary, move you into a better room, maybe buy you something nice." "That's not necessary." He smiled, leaning closer. "You're shaking. Why are you afraid of me?" "I'm not afraid, sir." "Yes, you are." He set down the glass, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You should be." Her pulse hammered in her ears. She stood abruptly. "If you'll excuse me." His hand shot out, gripping her wrist. "Not yet." She froze. "I'm not a cruel man, Anna. I reward loyalty. But when people forget who's in control, I remind them." His eyes gleamed. "Now, smile for me." She forced a faint curve of her lips. He released her wrist slowly, almost tenderly. "Good girl. That's better. Go to bed." She hurried from the room, trembling so hard she nearly fell on the stairs. Behind her, his voice followed like smoke. "Sweet dreams." Sleep never came that night. She sat on the floor of her room, knees pulled to her chest. The bruise on her wrist darkened. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw his smile. By dawn, her pillow was wet with tears she hadn't noticed falling. Mrs. Collins found her in the morning, pale and shaken. "You didn't sleep," the older woman said quietly. "I'm fine," Anna lied. "No, you're not," Mrs. Collins sighed. "I told you to be careful. He's testing you. That's how it starts." "How what starts?" Mrs. Collins hesitated, then whispered. "The breaking. He enjoys it, making people feel small. Don't give him that." Anna looked down at her hands. "What can I do? I need this job." "Then protect yourself," Mrs. Collins said, pressing a small silver cross into her palm. "Keep this with you. It won't stop him, but maybe it'll remind you there's still good somewhere." Anna nodded, tears burning her eyes. Thank you. The next week passed in slow dread. Every creak of the door, every approaching footstep made her flinch. Richard's moods shifted without warning. Some mornings he was polite, even charming. Other days his voice cut like a blade. He called her sweetheart when no one else was around, Miss Brooks when his wife or guests were present. One rainy night, when thunder rolled over the hills, she was called again. "Anna," his voice echoed down the hall, "come to my office." She hesitated, heart pounding, but obedience had been trained into her. She went. Inside, the lights were dim. Rain streaked the windows. He stood by the fireplace, tie undone, a different kind of hunger in his eyes. "Lock the door," he said. "Sir?" "Lock it." She obeyed slowly. The click of the lock sounded final. "What do you think of me, Anna?" I don't understand, sir. Do you think I'm a good man?" Her voice trembled. "Everyone says so." He laughed quietly. "Everyone says so, but you've seen more than everyone, haven't you?" He moved closer. "Tell me the truth." She backed away until her shoulders hit the wall. "You're my employer." "Not tonight." His hand caught her chin, forcing her to look at him. "You're beautiful when you're scared." "Please don't." He kissed her. She tried to push him away, but he was stronger. The world narrowed to the sound of rain and the smell of whiskey. When it was over, she lay on the floor, her uniform torn, her heart shattered. He adjusted his cufflinks as if nothing had happened. "Clean yourself up," he said coldly. "And remember, no one will believe you. You think the world cares about a maid's word against mine?" She said nothing. He threw a few bills at her feet. "Buy something nice." Then he left. Anna stayed there for a long time, staring at the money. Her body hurt, but the silence hurt more. She wanted to scream, but her voice felt stolen. When she finally stood, she walked back to her room through empty corridors, wiping blood from her lip. In her small sink, she washed until her skin burned. The water ran pink. For days, she moved like a ghost. Mrs. Collins noticed but said nothing. Her eyes carried the weight of understanding. The other servants looked away. In the Hale mansion, silence was currency. Everyone had learned its value. At night, Anna sat by the window, watching the lights of the city below. She thought of quitting, of leaving without a word. But then she saw the faces of Leo and Grace in her mind, hungry and waiting. She couldn't stop sending money. She couldn't stop surviving. So she stayed. The assaults continued, quiet and calculated. Sometimes he summoned her to discuss household matters. Other times he came to her quarters unannounced. Each time ended the same way, with his whisper, his money, and her silence. One evening, while dressing after another violation, she noticed her bottle of pills nearly empty. She had forgotten doses, missed days. Her hands shook as she counted. Only 2 left. She hadn't gone to the clinic in weeks. Fear rose in her throat. She sat on the floor, staring at the remaining pills, and something cold passed through her. She thought of his words. "Disease can't touch me." The arrogance in them. The belief that money and power were armor. And then, for the first time, another thought surfaced. Maybe he's wrong. The idea frightened her and freed her all at once. She didn't want revenge, not truly. She wanted him to feel what she felt, helpless, cornered, unclean in his own skin. That night, she packed a small bag. At dawn, she slipped out through the servant gate, walking until the mansion vanished behind trees. She found a cheap motel downtown, paid for a week in cash, and collapsed on the bed. The room smelled of smoke and old carpet. For 2 days she barely ate, replaying everything in her mind, the promises, the pain, the humiliation. Then she went to the free clinic. The same doctor recognized her immediately. "Anna, it's been months. You stopped your medication?" She nodded silently. "You can't do that. You risk your health and others." "I know," he sighed. "I'll renew your prescription, but you must take them daily." She looked at him, eyes hollow. "If someone hurt you," he said gently, "you can talk to the police. There are laws." "No law protects girls like me," she whispered. He had no answer. She took the pills and left. Back in her motel room, she stared at the bottle, then at her reflection in the cracked mirror. A faint, bitter smile touched her lips. "Maybe this is my weapon," she murmured. She didn't know whether she meant the pills or the truth inside her blood. But for the first time since arriving at the mansion, she felt a sliver of control. Small, dangerous, and alive. She opened the window, letting the city's night air wash over her. Somewhere down the street, a siren wailed, then faded. Anna closed her eyes. The world beyond the gate had returned, dirty, loud, real. And she would return to that other world soon, but not as the same girl who had walked in trembling. This time, she would not go to survive, she would go to fight. She turned off the light, lay back on the thin mattress, and whispered into the dark, "I have a weapon now." That whisper marked the end of fear and the birth of something colder. In the mansion on the hill, Richard Hale drank his evening whiskey, unaware that the quiet maid he had broken was already building the beginning of his end. The rain outside washed the streets clean, but not his sins. Nothing could. And when the dawn came, carrying the faintest glimmer of light across the city skyline, Anna Brooks opened her eyes and began to plan her return. The morning sunlight crept through the thin motel curtains, slicing across the room in pale, dusty lines. Anna lay on her back staring at the ceiling, the hum of traffic below rising like a pulse beneath the city's skin. The sheets smelled of cigarettes and detergent that had long lost its scent. She had not truly slept. Her body rested, but her mind kept moving, turning over every detail of what she would do next. For 3 days, she had replayed his voice in her head. "No one will believe you." Each repetition sharpened her resolve. She had believed him once, not anymore. When she finally rose, her reflection in the mirror startled her. Her face was thinner, her eyes darker. But there was something else there too, a quiet steadiness, like the calm that follows the eye of a storm. She brushed her hair back and whispered to herself, "You're not going back to beg. You're going back to end it." She ate a dry piece of bread from the motel vending machine, washed it down with water, then walked to a small electronics store 2 blocks away. Inside, under flickering fluorescent lights, she bought a used smartphone and a tiny recorder, the kind with a long battery life and a hidden mic. The clerk didn't ask questions. He just took her cash and wished her a good day. The world, she thought, is full of people who sell the tools of truth without ever knowing what truths they're selling. Back in her room, she practiced using the recorder, hiding it in the lining of her purse, then in the pocket of her apron. The click of the button was nearly silent. She recorded herself saying, "This is Anna Brooks, and this is my proof," then deleted it, then recorded again until her hands stopped shaking. By the time the sun began to sink, she had a plan. She would go back to the Hale mansion tomorrow, pretending remorse, pretending fear. Richard Hale believed in control. That was his weakness. He had to believe he still owned her. Only then would he let his guard down. That night, she wrote a letter to her aunt. "Tell Leo and Grace I'm fine. I'll send money soon. Don't worry if you don't hear from me for a few days." She folded the letter carefully, sealed it, and left it with the motel clerk to mail. If anything happened to her, at least her siblings would know she tried. As the city lights flickered outside, Anna whispered one final thought into the dark. Let him think I'm weak. It's the only way to win. The next morning, she returned to the gates of the Hale estate. The sky was overcast, the kind of gray that made everything look colder. The same guard stood watch. He recognized her instantly and frowned. You again, he said. Thought you quit. Please, Anna said softly, her voice trembling just enough. I made a mistake. I need my job back. I was sick, but I'm better now. I just want to work. He hesitated. Wait here. He spoke into his earpiece, listened, then turned back to her. Mrs. Collins will come. A few minutes later, the housekeeper appeared at the door. Her face, always tired, now looked shocked. Anna, what on earth are you doing here? I need to see Mr. Hale, Anna said quietly. Please. Child, you should have stayed away. You don't understand what... I understand perfectly, Anna interrupted. Please, Mrs. Collins, just one chance. The older woman studied her for a long moment, then sighed. You're walking into fire. I already burned, Anna said. Now I'm just walking through the ashes. Mrs. Collins didn't argue further. She led her through the massive doors into the familiar marble silence. Every step echoed memories she wished she could erase. When they reached the study, Mrs. Collins knocked softly. Sir, Miss Brooks is here. There was a pause, then a low, amused voice from inside. Send her in. Anna entered. Richard sat behind his desk, reading, glasses on, papers spread before him. He looked up slowly, and the corners of his mouth curled. Well, well, he said. The runaway returns. I'm sorry, sir, Anna said, lowering her gaze. I shouldn't have left. I was scared. He leaned back in his chair, savoring the moment. Scared of what? Of losing everything. My job, my income. I need the work, sir. I'll do better. He rose, walking around the desk until he stood close enough for her to feel his breath. You think you can leave and come crawling back whenever you want? No, sir, she whispered. I'll be loyal this time. He watched her face for a long second, then laughed softly. You're lucky I'm a forgiven man. Yes, sir, I could have replaced you easily, but I admit, I've missed you, Anna. His voice dropped. I'll give you your job back, but from now on you'll report directly to me. Understood? Yes, sir. Good girl. He lifted her chin with a finger, studying her eyes. You look thinner. Don't tell me you've been starving without me. She forced a weak smile. Just tired, sir. Then get some rest. Mrs. Collins will prepare your room again. Yes, sir. As she turned to leave, he added, Anna. She stopped. I hope you remember how things work here. I own every secret that enters this house. Don't forget that. I won't, she said softly and walked out, her fingers brushing the small recorder hidden inside her apron pocket. Mrs. Collins led her back to the servants' quarters. The older woman's eyes glistened. Why did you come back? She whispered once they were alone. Anna looked at her with quiet determination. Because he can't keep doing this to people. I need proof. Mrs. Collins froze. Proof? I'm recording everything now. Every word, every touch. One day he'll hang himself with his own voice. Mrs. Collins pressed a trembling hand to her chest. You'll get yourself killed. I'll get justice. Justice doesn't exist in this house. Then I'll make it exist. The two women stared at each other for a long moment. One hardened by years of survival, the other reborn in defiance. Finally, Mrs. Collins turned away. God help you, child. That night, Anna unpacked her few belongings, placed the small silver cross on her table, and set the recorder beside it. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. She pressed the button, whispered the date and time, then turned it off. Just knowing it was there gave her courage. The following weeks blurred into a strange performance. Anna played the part of the obedient servant perfectly. She smiled when spoken to, worked tirelessly, and even thanked him when he handed her extra money. He believed every moment of it. Richard's arrogance was his blindfold. He called her to his office for tasks, which always ended the same way, with his hands on her, his voice low and cruel. Each encounter burned into the small black recorder hidden beneath her blouse. The first time she heard his voice on playback, she shook so badly she had to sit down. But she kept recording. Each file was another stone in the wall she was building between them. Mrs. Collins noticed her newfound calm. "You're not the same," she said one morning. "I can't afford to be," Anna replied. "Fear won't save me. Truth will." The older woman looked around nervously. "Keep your voice down. I'm not afraid anymore." "You should be," Mrs. Collins whispered. "He's getting worse. Mrs. Hale's been traveling for weeks. There's no one to temper him." Anna hesitated. "Where did she go?" "Europe, I think. Charity tours. She never stays long when he's like this." "Like what?" Mrs. Collins gave her a tired, pitying look. "Like a man who thinks God himself owes him forgiveness." By early autumn, small signs of change began to appear. Richard seemed tired, distracted. He rubbed his temples often, his once perfect posture slouching slightly. He coughed during breakfast meetings, dismissing it as nothing. "Just a cold," he muttered when Anna handed him tea. But she noticed the weight he'd lost, the pallor under his tan. Sometimes his hands shook when he reached for a glass. She said nothing, only observed, recording each moment, his coughing, his denial, his anger at his own weakness. One evening, he summoned her to the study as usual. She entered quietly, closing the door behind her. He stood by the mirror, staring at his reflection with a strange expression. When he turned, his eyes were red. "Anna," he said softly, "do you believe in karma?" She blinked. I don't know, sir." "People say you can't outrun your sins." He laughed bitterly. "Do you think that's true?" "I think people get what they give," she said carefully. He nodded slowly. "Maybe. Or maybe the world is just chaos." Then, almost casually, he added, "I've been feeling unwell lately, but I suppose it's just stress, too many responsibilities." She forced a sympathetic smile. "You should rest more, sir." "Yes," he murmured, looking past her. "Rest." His voice carried a note of exhaustion she had never heard before. When she left the room, she leaned against the hallway wall, trembling. The plan was working, though she hadn't expected it to feel like this, watching him unravel not through force, but through the slow erosion of consequence. The sickness inside him was doing what no law ever could. A week later, Mrs. Hale returned. Her arrival filled the mansion with perfume and tension. She moved through the house like a ghost in designer heels, greeting staff with distant politeness. At dinner, she and Richard sat at opposite ends of the long table, barely speaking. Anna served in silence, her recorder hidden under her apron. "Richard," Catherine said finally, cutting into her food without looking up, "you look terrible. Are you ill?" "Just tired," he said shortly. "You should see a doctor." "I already have." "And?" He didn't answer. Catherine's eyes narrowed. "You're hiding something." "I'm hiding nothing," he snapped, then forced a smile. "Stop worrying, dear. You'll get wrinkles." Catherine set her fork down and stared at him. "I know that tone. It's the same one you used before every scandal you paid to disappear." "Careful," he warned. "You forget who you're talking to." "No," she said coldly. "I forget why I'm still talking to you." Anna lowered her eyes, pretending not to hear. but her recorder caught every word. It captured the sound of a perfect marriage cracking in real time. That night, Anna walked past the master bedroom and heard shouting. "You're lying to me," Catherine's voice rang out. "Who is she this time?" "Don't be ridiculous," Richard barked. "I saw the messages. Royal Hotel, blue dress, 2 p.m. You didn't even bother deleting them properly. Stay out of my phone. You're destroying what little dignity I have left." "Then stop looking for pain where there is none." A slap followed. She couldn't tell whose hand made it. Then silence. Anna backed away, her heart pounding. She didn't want to see them, didn't want to be caught listening, but she knew what those words meant. Catherine had found the messages he had once sent her. Royal Hotel, blue dress, 2 p.m. The same pattern, the same script. She returned to her room, sat on the edge of her bed, and pressed record again. Her voice was steady. "He's getting weaker. He's losing control. The wife knows something." Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, rolling over the hills. Inside, Anna's resolve solidified. Every lie he had built was beginning to collapse under its own weight. She didn't need to lift a finger. She just had to let the truth breathe. 2 days later, Mrs. Hale confronted her in the kitchen. Anna froze as the elegant woman stormed in, holding her husband's phone. "You," Catherine hissed, slamming the phone on the counter. "You've been meeting my husband?" "No, ma'am," Anna said, backing away. "I haven't." "Don't lie to me." Catherine's slap came fast and hard, burning across Anna's cheek. "You think I don't know your type? Poor little orphan, playing innocent to catch a rich man's sympathy." Tears stung Anna's eyes, not from pain but from humiliation. "I never wanted him," she whispered. "Then why are there messages? Why did he pay for your hotel?" "Ask him," Anna said, trembling. Catherine raised her hand again, but Mrs. Collins burst into the room. "Enough!" she shouted. "This isn't the way." Catherine turned on her. "Stay out of this, Collins." The housekeeper stood firm. "You think she wanted this? You think any of them did?" Catherine froze, eyes widening. "Any of them?" But Mrs. Collins said nothing more. Catherine's anger wavered, replaced by confusion, then disbelief. She looked between them, lips trembling. Without another word, she turned and left the room. Anna collapsed against the counter, breathing hard. Mrs. Collins touched her shoulder gently. "It's starting," she said. "The truth always finds a way out." Anna nodded, tears falling silently. "Let it come." That night, Richard received a call from his doctor. Anna overheard through the thin office door. Short sentences, a pause, then the crash of glass against the wall. She pressed her ear to the door, catching fragments. "Can't be right. Tests don't lie. Positive." Then silence. When the door opened suddenly, she stumbled back. He stood there, face pale, sweat beading on his forehead. "Get out of my sight," he growled. "All of you." The next morning, he didn't come down for breakfast. Mrs. Collins whispered that he'd called his lawyer. Catherine left the house before noon. The mansion, once echoing with power, now felt hollow. Anna sat in her room, staring at the recorder on the table. The files stored within it held his confessions, his threats, his laughter. Proof. But she also knew the sickness spreading through his body was its own confession, one no court could dismiss. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "Tomorrow it ends." Outside, dawn broke, pale and quiet, over the Hale estate. The gates, once symbols of his control, now stood like bars on a prison he had built with his own hands. The Hale mansion was quieter than it had ever been. Even the fountains outside seemed to murmur more softly, as if afraid of the man pacing inside. The morning light fell across the marble floors, illuminating Richard Hale's reflection, a ghost of the man who once commanded every room he entered. His shirt hung loose on his frame, his eyes sunken. He had not slept, and the whiskey bottle on his desk told the story better than he ever could. He had spent the entire night replaying the doctor's words. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hale. The test is positive. You'll need further evaluation." The voice had been calm, professional, clinical, everything he suddenly wasn't. Now, the mighty Richard Hale stood staring at the medical envelope, his hand trembling. He tore it open again, reading the lines as if sheer disbelief could rewrite them. HIV positive. The letters blurred through the film of sweat in his eyes. He slammed his fist onto the desk, shouting to no one. "Impossible!" But the echo that came back sounded weak. When Mrs. Collins entered to bring his breakfast tray, he barked, "Get out!" The tray clattered to the floor. The old woman left silently, but outside the door she crossed herself. She had seen the signs, the fear behind his anger, the cracking of his perfect mask. Somewhere, deep inside, she knew justice had started moving. Anna, down in the servants' quarters, heard the commotion. Her stomach twisted, not with pity but with the strange weight of vindication. The truth was finally touching him. Yet, even as she thought it, a flicker of dread crossed her mind. Power, when cornered, often turns violent. She buttoned her apron and whispered, "Stay calm. Don't show anything." At noon, Mrs. Collins found her polishing silver. "He knows," the older woman said quietly. "He got his test results." Anna looked up. "What did he do?" "Drank, screamed, broke things. He'll look for someone to blame." Their eyes met. Both knew who that someone would be. By evening, the storm came, literally and otherwise. Rain pounded the roof while thunder rolled over the hills. Richard called her name from the top of the staircase. "Anna!" His voice was hoarse, furious. She climbed the steps slowly, forcing herself to breathe evenly. He stood in the hallway, disheveled, his tie gone, his eyes bloodshot. "Did you know?" he demanded. "Know what, sir?" "Don't play innocent." He thrust the crumpled medical report toward her. "You gave this to me." Her hands shook. "I don't understand." "You infected me. You filthy—" The word that followed cut through her like glass. Anna's face went pale. "I didn't—" He grabbed her wrist, squeezing until she cried out. "You did this on purpose. You wanted revenge." "Let me go. Tell me the truth." His spit flecked her face. "You planned this, didn't you? You came back to destroy me." She yanked free, backing away. "You destroyed yourself," she whispered. "What?" "You did this to yourself. All the money, all the lies, and still you think you're untouchable." For a moment he looked stunned. Then rage took over. "You'll regret this," he said through clenched teeth. "I'll ruin you. You'll rot in prison before anyone believes your lies." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the chandelier trembled. The next morning, police cars arrived at the estate. Their blue lights flickered against the white walls, turning the mansion into a stage of chaos. Richard watched from the balcony, his lawyer beside him. "Charge her," he said coldly. "Intentional infection. I want her locked up." "But, sir—" "Do it." Downstairs, 2 officers approached Anna as she was washing dishes. "Anna Brooks?" one asked. She nodded, heart pounding. "You're under arrest for deliberate transmission of a communicable disease. You have the right to remain silent." The world tilted. Mrs. Collins shouted, "This is madness. She's the victim." But her voice drowned beneath the echo of handcuffs. As they led Anna through the rain to the waiting car, she caught Richard's eyes on the balcony. He looked almost triumphant, until he coughed violently into his handkerchief. staining it red. At the station, the interrogation room smelled of coffee and damp paper. A young female officer brought her a cup of water and said softly, "Someone will be here soon to represent you." Hours later, the door opened and a woman in a gray suit stepped in. "Anna Brooks?" she asked gently. "I'm Nancy Reed from the Legal Aid Center. I'm your attorney." Anna nodded numbly. Nancy sat opposite her, setting down a folder. "I read the file. They're claiming you intentionally infected your employer. Is that true?" Anna shook her head, tears spilling. "He forced me. He hurt me. I tried to leave, but he dragged me back. I never wanted any of this." "Okay," Nancy said calmly. "Start from the beginning. Everything. Don't leave anything out." For the next hour, the small room filled with the sound of Anna's trembling voice as she recounted months of fear, the manipulation, the assaults, the threats, the humiliation. When she finished, Nancy's face was pale with anger. "Do you have any evidence?" Anna hesitated, then reached into her pocket. "Yes." She placed the small recorder on the table. "Everything is here. His voice, his threats, even the part where he says disease can't touch him." Nancy picked it up like it was a grenade. "You're telling me you recorded him without consent?" "Yes, that's technically illegal, but it might be admissible if it proves coercion." She pressed her hands together, thinking. "You just gave me ammunition. We'll fight this." Anna exhaled shakily. For the first time in months, someone had said we. News spread faster than truth. Within a week, tabloids splashed headlines across every screen. "Philanthropist Richard Hale victim of vengeful maid." "Wealthy CEO sues former employee for biological attack." Catherine Hale watched the coverage from her hotel room downtown, eyes hollow. She replayed his interviews, his careful sorrow, his feigned dignity, and finally understood the depth of his deceit. When the reporter asked about Anna Brooks, Richard's voice dripped with false compassion. "It's tragic," he said. "I tried to help her, but she repaid kindness with cruelty." Catherine turned off the TV. In the mirror, she saw a woman who had spent years believing in a man built entirely out of lies. Quietly, she called her driver. "Take me home." The first court hearing drew a crowd. Cameras flashed outside the courthouse as police escorted Anna in handcuffs. She kept her head down, the whispers slicing through the air. Inside, Nancy guided her to the defense table. Across the aisle, Richard Hale sat surrounded by lawyers, his face carefully composed but his hands twitching. When the judge entered, the room rose. The prosecutor began with practiced sympathy. "Your Honor, this case is simple. The defendant knowingly endangered her employer, a respected citizen, out of resentment. She confessed to being HIV positive and continued relations with him without disclosure." Nancy stood slowly. "Your Honor, my client never consented to those relations. She was coerced, assaulted, and silenced under threat of unemployment. We have recordings to prove it." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Recordings?" "Yes, Your Honor." The courtroom buzzed. Richard shifted uneasily. Nancy pressed a button on a small speaker. The room filled with his voice, smooth, commanding, unmistakable. "If I want you, you say yes. That's how this works." Gasps rippled through the audience. Catherine Hale, seated quietly in the back, closed her eyes as if the sound itself confirmed what she had always feared. Richard sprang up. "This is entrapment. That recording is illegal." The judge banged his gavel. "Sit down, Mr. Hale." Nancy's voice remained steady. "Your Honor, this demonstrates a pattern of coercion. The prosecution's claim of consent collapses in light of this evidence." The hearing adjourned with murmurs echoing down the hallways. Outside, reporters shouted questions. Nancy shielded Anna as they walked to the car. "Don't talk to anyone," she said. "The only story that matters is the one told under oath." Over the next weeks, the case deepened. Nancy uncovered 3 more women, former employees who had signed non-disclosure agreements years earlier. One had fled to another state, another worked abroad, the third refused to speak but sent a handwritten letter describing identical abuse. The puzzle completed itself piece by piece. Meanwhile, Richard's health worsened. The cough returned, his weight dropped, his suits hung on him like costumes from a life he no longer owned. Still, he appeared on television, preaching his innocence. "I'm the real victim here," he told a journalist, but even the camera caught the tremor in his hands. Catherine watched silently. When reporters approached her, she said only, "No comment." But she started sending documents to Nancy's office, financial statements, private emails, appointment logs, anonymous but decisive. Each envelope arrived without a return address tied with a red ribbon. Nancy understood who they came from. The trial proper began in late winter. The courthouse steps were packed with onlookers, activists, and journalists. Inside, tension hung heavy as the prosecution presented its version, the benevolent millionaire seduced by a manipulative maid. But, one by one, Nancy dismantled it. The recordings, the witness statements, the medical inconsistencies, each fact stripped away the myth of Richard Hale. On the 4th day, Nancy called him to the stand. He walked slowly, using the rail for balance. His confidence flickered like a dying flame. "Mr. Hale," Nancy began, "is it true you employed Ms. Brooks at your residence?" "Yes." "And that you had a sexual relationship with her?" "I did not. She forced herself on me." "Interesting." Nancy pressed a button, playing another recording. "You work for me. You do as I say. Don't make me angry, Anna." The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order. Nancy stepped closer. "Still think she forced herself on you?" Richard's jaw clenched. "Those are lies. They're your words." He glared at her, sweat glistening on his forehead. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "On the contrary," she said softly, "I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A man who mistook fear for consent and silence for loyalty." When she returned to her table, Anna's hands trembled under the desk. Nancy leaned over and whispered, "We're winning." Outside the courthouse that evening, protesters held signs. "Justice for Anna Brooks." Others simply read, "Believe her." For every person who doubted her, 10 more began to see through the glittering facade of Richard Hale. The empire he built on image was collapsing, brick by brick. Inside his mansion, empty now except for Mrs. Collins, dust gathered on the silver frames of his photographs. The servants had left, the charity partners had withdrawn, and the banks had frozen his accounts. Mrs. Collins walked through the echoing halls one last time, whispering, "The house remembers everything, even the lies." Then she locked the door and left the keys on the marble counter. 2 weeks later, the final verdict day arrived. The courtroom overflowed. The judge's voice cut through the murmurs. "The jury finds the defendant, Anna Brooks, not guilty on all charges." A collective exhale filled the room. Nancy gripped Anna's hand. "It's over." But it wasn't over for Richard Hale. The judge continued. "Furthermore, in light of new evidence, the court orders a criminal investigation into the plaintiff, Mr. Hale, for multiple counts of assault, coercion, and obstruction of justice." Catherine rose quietly from her seat. For the first time in years, she smiled, not out of joy but release. Richard slumped forward, eyes wide. His lawyer whispered frantically, but he didn't move. The gavel came down like a final heartbeat. Outside, cameras flashed as Anna stepped into the winter sunlight. Reporters shouted her name, but she didn't answer. She simply looked up at the gray sky, breathing in the cold air as if it were freedom itself. Nancy touched her arm. "You can start over now." Anna nodded. "I don't know where yet, but yes." As they reached the car, Catherine Hale approached. For a moment, the two women just looked at each other, the wife and the servant, both survivors of the same man in different prisons. "I'm sorry," Catherine said quietly. "I should have seen it sooner." Anna shook her head. "You saw what he wanted you to see." Catherine's eyes glistened. "What will you do now?" "Live," Anna said simply. "Just live." Catherine extended her hand. "If you ever need anything," Anna took it gently. "Thank you." They parted without another word. That night, news networks across the country aired the verdict. Footage showed Richard Hale being escorted into a police car, his once impeccable suit hanging loosely on his frame. Commentators debated how the nation's most generous man had hidden such cruelty for so long. Hashtags filled the screens. Support groups reached out to other victims. A movement began, one that bore her name. In her small apartment downtown, Anna watched the coverage for a while, then turned off the TV. Silence filled the room. Peaceful, not heavy. She opened the window and let the cold night air brush her face. On the table lay her recorder, now empty. She had deleted every file. The past no longer needed to live in her pocket. Her phone buzzed with a message from Nancy. "We did it." She typed back, "Thank you for believing me." Meanwhile, in the city hospital, Richard Hale stared at the ceiling, an IV dripping beside his bed. The TV above him played his own downfall on repeat. His name, once golden, now spoke only of disgrace. He closed his eyes, hearing echoes of his own words. "If I want you, you say yes." They sounded monstrous now. For the first time in his life, no one was listening. A month later, Anna stood on a small hill overlooking the orphanage her siblings attended. Leo and Grace ran toward her, laughing, their arms flung wide. She dropped to her knees, hugging them tightly. The winter wind carried their laughter across the grass, clean and bright. She promised herself silently, "They will never know that part of my story, only that I survived it." As the sun dipped behind the city skyline, she turned toward the road. Her life stretched ahead, uncertain but hers. Every scar, every memory, every breath belonged to her again. She whispered into the wind, "Power doesn't make you untouchable, and silence doesn't last forever." The wind seemed to answer by carrying her words away, not erased, but finally free. The snow had almost melted by the time the newspapers stopped printing his name. What remained were fragments, a ruined empire, a few shuttered charities, and a mansion that stood like a tomb above the city. The gates of the Hale estate stayed locked, the gardens overgrown, the windows dark. People whispered that even the fountains had frozen over from shame. Inside a hospital room not far away, Richard Hale lay staring at the ceiling tiles. Each one looked the same, pale squares of emptiness. Machines hummed softly beside his bed, counting the seconds he refused to measure. His wrists, once decorated with gold watches, were now thin and bruised from needles. The world had stopped listening to his voice. Only the beeping monitor still answered him. The doctor entered quietly, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Hale, how are you feeling today?" Richard turned his head slightly, like a ghost waiting for permission to vanish. The doctor didn't smile. "Your blood pressure is stable. We'll continue treatment." "For what?" Richard muttered. "You can't cure reputation." When the doctor left, he reached for the remote and turned on the television. A talk show was playing, a panel of journalists discussing the fall of the billionaire. His face flashed across the screen, followed by clips from the trial. The words predator, manipulator, disgrace floated in bold letters below his photo. He threw the remote at the wall, shattering it. The nurse rushed in, startled. "Turn that off," he shouted. Then his voice broke. "Please." The nurse nodded and switched off the screen. When she left, silence filled the room again. For the first time in his life, he felt small inside the space he could no longer control. Across the city, Anna Brooks woke before dawn. Her small apartment smelled of rain and coffee. She sat by the window, watching early buses crawl through the wet streets. The world outside was ordinary again. No cameras, no headlines, just people moving forward. She had found a new job at a community center, cleaning classrooms and helping with paperwork. The pay was modest, but it was honest. Each morning, she passed the mirror and saw a different reflection. Not the trembling girl who once bowed her head to survive, but a woman who had learned to stand straight even when the wind blew against her. Her scars hadn't disappeared. They had simply changed shape, becoming part of the story she no longer feared to tell. She arrived at the center early, as usual. Children's drawings covered the walls, bright suns, crooked houses, stick figures holding hands. The air smelled of chalk and hope. Mrs. Lewis, the director, smiled when Anna walked in. "You're always first," she said warmly. "The kids adore you." Anna smiled back. "They give me more than I give them." At lunchtime, she helped a little girl named Mia fix her broken shoelaces. The child looked up and asked, "Miss Anna, is it true you were on TV?" Anna froze for a second, then nodded. "A long time ago. Did you do something bad?" She shook her head gently. "No, sweetheart. I just told the truth." Mia seemed satisfied and ran off to play. Anna watched her go, her throat tightening. Telling the truth had cost her everything, but it had also given her something she hadn't known she could have again: peace. One evening, after work, Anna received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Miss Brooks," said a male voice, "this is St. Vincent Hospital. Mr. Richard Hale has listed you as someone he wishes to see." She froze. "That must be a mistake." "No, ma'am, he specifically requested you." She hung up without answering. The name itself was enough to pull her back into memories she had spent months trying to bury. But that night she couldn't sleep. His face kept rising in her mind. The arrogance, the control, and now, perhaps, the decay. Why would he want to see her? An apology? A trap? By dawn, she had made her decision. Sometimes closure isn't given. It has to be taken. The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and loneliness. Anna walked slowly, her shoes squeaking on the linoleum. Nurses passed her without a glance. When she reached room 407, she hesitated, her hand hovering near the door. Through the small window, she could see him, older, thinner, the lines of power replaced by veins of fear. She knocked once and entered. Richard turned his head. For a moment, disbelief flickered in his eyes. "You came." She stood near the door, arms crossed. "You asked for me." He tried to sit up, but winced from pain. "I wanted to see your face one last time." "Why?" "Because you're the only person who ever saw me without the mask." His voice was rough, tired. "The world thinks I'm a monster. Maybe they're right." "Maybe?" she said quietly. He looked away. "You wanted justice. You got it. The press, the courts, they took everything. Are you satisfied?" She walked closer, stopping at the foot of the bed. "Justice isn't about satisfaction. It's about truth." He laughed weakly. "Truth is a luxury. People only care about the version that entertains them." "No," she said. "People care about the version that hurts them less, but pain is still truth. You taught me that." Silence stretched between them. Machines beeped softly. Outside the window, snow began to fall again, slow and soundless. He broke the silence first. When I heard the diagnosis, I thought it was punishment, but it was a mirror. I saw what I'd done reflected in my own body. Every life I touched with cruelty came back to live inside me. She studied him, unsure whether to believe the words or the performance behind them. Why tell me this? Because I have no one else to tell. Catherine divorced me. The foundation collapsed. Even my lawyer won't answer my calls. The only person who still exists in my story is you. That's not forgiveness, she said softly. That's loneliness. He closed his eyes, breathing hard. Maybe they're the same thing at the end. For a moment, she almost pitied him. Almost. Then she remembered the nights when she couldn't breathe, the humiliation, the fear that had settled into her bones. You took everything from me, she whispered. And you think a few words will make it even? No, he said. Nothing can make it even. He opened his eyes. But maybe it can end. She nodded slowly. Then this is the end. He looked at her one last time. Do you hate me? I used to, she said. Now I just don't think of you. That, somehow, hurt him more than hate. His lips trembled into a faint smile. Then you're free. No, she replied, turning toward the door. I was free the day I stopped needing you to say it. She left without looking back. Behind her, the monitor continued to beep in steady rhythm. By the time she reached the elevator, she realized the sound had stopped. The news reported his death 2 days later. Complications from pneumonia. The headlines were small this time, tucked between celebrity gossip and market reports. Disgraced philanthropist Richard Hale dies at 47. No memorials, no public mourning. The mansion was auctioned off to pay debts, the furniture scattered, the name forgotten except in the archives of scandal. When Anna heard, she felt no joy, no sorrow, only a strange, quiet relief, like a chapter finally closing. She went to work that day as usual, scrubbing desks and arranging crayons. Life had a way of continuing, indifferent to tragedy or triumph. At lunchtime, she stepped outside into the cold air, tilting her face to the winter sun. Mrs. Lewis joined her. You okay? Anna nodded. Yes, just thinking. About him? About everything. She smiled faintly. You know what's funny? For so long I thought my story ended with him, but now I realize it didn't even begin until he was gone. Mrs. Lewis placed a hand on her shoulder. Then write the next chapter well. That weekend, Anna took the bus to her hometown. The road wound through empty fields still dusted with snow. She leaned her head against the window, watching the world blur past. The closer she got to home, the lighter her chest felt. At the station, Leo and Grace were waiting. Grace ran first, her hair flying. Anna! Anna caught her in her arms, laughing. You've grown so much. Leo, taller now, smiled shyly. Aunt said you'd visit soon. I kept my promise. She kissed his forehead. You're safe. That's all that matters. They spent the evening by the fire, eating soup and telling stories. The house smelled of wood smoke and warmth. For the first time in years, Anna laughed without flinching at the sound. Later, when the children were asleep, her aunt poured tea and sat beside her. You look peaceful, the old woman said. Different. I am. What happened in the city? Anna looked at the flames, their reflections dancing in her eyes. Something ended. Something began. The aunt didn't press further. Then leave it there. The past has long arms, but it can't grab what you refuse to carry. Anna smiled. You always know what to say. Weeks turned into months. Spring arrived, painting the city with color again. Anna returned to work, now promoted to program coordinator. She started organizing workshops for women, teaching them about rights, self-protection, financial independence. The first day, only 6 women came. By the end of the month, there were 40. During one session, a young woman raised her hand nervously. "Miss Anna, how did you learn to be brave?" Anna thought for a moment before answering. "By being afraid first. Bravery isn't the absence of fear, it's deciding something else is more important." After class, she walked home under blooming cherry trees. The air smelled sweet, the sky wide and open. She paused on a bridge overlooking the river and watched the water flow. Steady, unbothered, infinite. The world no longer looked divided between victims and villains. It looked alive again. One evening, she received an envelope in the mail. No return address, only her name written in neat, familiar handwriting. Inside was a single folded letter and a key. The letter read, "To Miss Brooks, if you're reading this, I am gone. This key belongs to a safety deposit box at First National Bank. Inside, you'll find a trust account, half of what remains of my estate. Consider it restitution, not redemption. I know money can't erase what I did, but perhaps it can build something better in the hands of the one person who deserved more than I gave. R.H." Anna read it twice, then folded it slowly. She didn't cry, but her throat ached with something close to sorrow. The next day, she visited the bank. Inside the box was a check and a small velvet pouch. She opened it to find the silver cross Mrs. Collins had once given her, the one she'd lost months before. Somehow, it had found its way back. She took it as a sign, not of forgiveness, but of completion. That afternoon, she met with Mrs. Lewis. "I want to start a fund," Anna said, "for women like me, a place where silence doesn't win." Mrs. Lewis nodded. "We'll name it after you." "No," Anna said softly. "Name it after every woman who was told to keep quiet." And so they did. The Brooks Foundation for Voices Unheard opened that summer, offering legal aid and counseling to survivors. Reporters came again, but this time the cameras didn't frighten her. When one asked, "What inspired this project?" she answered simply, "Pain turned into purpose." Months later, she visited Mrs. Collins, who now lived in a small seaside town. The older woman's hair was white, her hands frail but steady. "You did it, child," she said, holding Anna's hands. "You turned his poison into medicine." Anna smiled. "I just stopped letting silence speak for me." They sat by the window watching the tide roll in. The sea whispered like forgiveness without words. On the anniversary of the trial, Anna returned to the hill overlooking the old Hale estate. The mansion had been sold and renovated, its new owners unaware of the ghosts buried beneath the marble. She stood by the gate, listening to the wind. For a moment, she could almost hear the echoes of her younger self walking those corridors, afraid and small. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Rest." A gentle breeze answered, carrying away the last of the memories. As she walked back down the hill, her phone buzzed. A message from Leo. "Got accepted to university." Another from Grace. "Won first prize at art fair." She laughed. Tears brightened her eyes. The future was no longer something she feared. It was something she was building, brick by brick, with her own hands. That night, she wrote in her journal, the same one she'd carried since the beginning. "There was a time I thought my voice was small, but even a whisper can start an avalanche if it's true. I forgive the world for being cruel. I forgive myself for surviving it." She closed the notebook, turned off the light, and lay down. Outside, rain began to fall, tapping softly against the window. not like the storms that once terrified her, but like a lullaby reminding her she was safe. In another world, perhaps, Richard Hale was still pacing marble floors, still believing power made him immortal. But in this world, Anna Brooks slept peacefully, her breathing steady, her dreams finally her own. The city carried on outside, indifferent yet alive, proof that even after ruin, life insists on beginning again. And in that quiet rhythm, somewhere between sorrow and sunrise, the story that began with silence ended in something louder, brighter, unbreakable.